Hi, it's Maya here with my August reads and receipts. In these videos I go through what I read, my TBR account, how I did with my challenges, and what books I have bought that month. And the goal of all of this is to get my physical TBR account down. Usually I have a full script for these videos, but that has become quite cumbersome, and I'm just gonna try to do this with just a few notes because I have been trouble getting the headspace to do more taxing videos lately, so let's see how I do. As always, timestamps will be in the description for specific books. And let's start with the reads. My TBR count at the start of the month was 68 books. I started August by reading an owned ebook, and that one was Thorn Bound by Stephanie Burgess, which is a fantasy novella, and it's a Fantasy of Manners series, and this is the third novella in the Harwood spellbook series. The novella series is set in this alternate England called Angland, so it's like England with magic and fae. And there has been 3 novellas. This is the second one to star Cassandra Harwood. The first one was Cassandra Harwood, then there was a prequel, and then this third one is about Cassandra Harwood again. So Cassandra is the first woman magician of the nation, but she subsequently lost her magic, and that's not a spoiler, that's where the first novella starts. So she doesn't have or can't use magic anymore. She burned it all out, so if she tries to use it again, she will probably die. So in this novella I like the fae part of the plot, the supernatural part, and I like the ending, but I had a lot of trouble with the other parts of the plot. So I like the setting, it has a school setting, but the main character wasn't really allowed to do anything in that setting because the majority of the time of the novella was spent on people rebuking the main character about her life choices, and it was very tiring to read, and I didn't find it fun at all. So she couldn't really do anything without people harping on her and bringing her down, and I just had a bad time with it. But like I said, I like the fae parts and I like the ending, so I gave 3 stars in all. Then from the library I read the horror novella The Monster of Elendhaven by Jennifer Giesbrecht. This one has 2 main characters. There's Johan, who's a murderer with no morals, and there's Florian, who is a magician with a vengeance, and these 2 form a partnership and later a romance, and it's all very murdery. So this one is set in this dark port city with sort of a historical Nordic feel, which is why I called it Elendhaven and not Haven, because it had like this Nordic sense to me, but it's set of course in a fantasy land and not in our world. I really like the characters, they were a bit twisted, and I would have hoped that the novella would have focused more on them and what makes them tick, and also the relationship of the 2. I really like especially Florian, he's just my kind of character. He was the mage, and this sort of mage with a grudge doing dark things is really interesting to me. Basically the atmosphere wasn't all there for me, I wanted a bit more oomph. This felt like something I could have really loved with the darkness and the magic, but it wasn't quite there for me. I gave it 3 stars. Then I read my NetGalley review copy of The Four Profound Weaves by R.B. Lemberg. This is a high fantasy, I think novella. It's a bit under 200 pages, so either a short novel or a novella. I have done a full review of this and I will link it above and below, but I will just say that this is a beautifully written desert fantasy with great atmosphere and weaving magic, which I really liked. And it follows 2 trans elders who go on a quest. There's Uisia, who wants to learn to weave from death, and then there's the nameless man Nensasire, who wants to get a new name. This one got 4 stars from me. Next I picked up an owned physical book, and that one was the horror anthology The Humanity of Monsters, edited by Michael Matheson, and this was a buddy read, and this was published by Cheese-In Press, I'm gonna say that right now. And this is a publisher that sort of imploded last year because it was revealed that they didn't pay their authors on time or at all, and there was also a lot of bullying and harassment unearthed and a bad working atmosphere there. So this publisher sort of has gone away, and I wouldn't recommend buying their stuff if it's still available, but I have bought this past Worldcon, so in 2019, before all this came to light. And the editor of this anthology revealed that they had to fight really hard to get the authors compensated. That's about the publisher. Let's talk about the book. This didn't have a lot of stories that I loved, and quite a few of them were quite forgettable. But let's talk about my favorites first. My favorites were The Bread We Eat in Dreams by Catherine M. Valenti, which is about a demon who lives on Earth, and it has very lush writing in the Valenti way. And I also really like The Emperor's Old Bones by Gemma Files, which is very dark and brutal, and it was like a perfect fit for this book and the title of the book. I'm googling how to say proboscis? Proboscis. My surprise favorite of the anthology was Proboscis by Laird Barron, and it was a surprise because it had unlikable characters and an uninspiring setting, like unlikable characters in a way that I wasn't interested really in them, and I really usually need an interesting character to follow. And I also hadn't read anything from the author before, so I didn't know if I would like them or not, but you can really get me with a great something happens on video that didn't happen when you filmed it scene. And that one hooked me. This story was also the only one that had a feeling of dread for me. Like I felt this constant growing feeling of dread when I was reading it. And I liked how a lot of things were left unexplained. So those three were my favorites. Other than that, I really like The Things by Peter Watts, which is like a retelling of the Thing movie. I did have a few gripes, especially with the word of the use rape in the story. But then I also liked In Winter by Sonia Taffe, which was a Snow Queen retelling, just because I like Snow Queen. It was like really short. Another quite short story was Silvia Moreno Garcia's A Handful of Earth, which was a short look into the lives of Dracula's brides, so the undead death of Dracula's brides. But anyway, I really enjoyed that. So those were the high points for me. One thing that I didn't understand was why Tasting Gomoa by Chinala Onwualu was chosen as the opening story. I don't think it works as an opening. Like I said, a lot of the stories were quite forgettable, but there was one story that I skipped, and that one was Night They Missed the Horror Show by Joe Lansdale. This one was written in the 80s and it is very 80s horror. And this is the kind of horror that tries to be gritty and disturbing by focusing on mundane, real-world evil. And I don't really care about that sort of horror. I decided to skip this one only after glancing at the first two pages, so the first spread of the story. On the first page, the main characters who are racists use the N-word repeatedly and it's written out in full. And then on the next page, a dog that's been hit by a car is described in like vivid gory detail, and this is the sort of horror that I just can't with. So I gave this one 2 or 2.5 stars, maybe 2, and reading this brought my TBR down to 67 books. Then I picked up another owned physical book, and that one was The True Queen by Zen Cho, which is so pale, maybe here? Yeah. So I picked up The True Queen, and this is a historical fantasy of manners novel. This is set in the same world as Sorcerer to the Crown, so this magical Regency England, but this book is also set in Malaysia and the land of the Fae. Two sisters, Muna and Sakti, are cursed and they have to leave their island for London to get help from the sorcerers, but they have to travel through the land of the Fae to get there, and Muna is our main character. And she has to save her sister Sakti without revealing too much of the magic or the situation to the English, who she doesn't completely trust. I have to say that this one was quite predictable. I guessed some things like right from the start, and then when we were given more clues, I guessed the rest. Usually I'm not a plot-focused reader, I'm a character-focused reader, but this one was a bit too predictable for even me. What I liked was the dragons. I really like the dragon characters. They like do a trip and see a bunch of dragons. I was especially happy about the dragon having a Regency nickname like Rollo. I also really liked Mak Gengan, who is this powerful Malaysian witch, but she doesn't feature a lot in either of these books. I just like her. She features more in this one than Sorcerer to the Crown, but I did like Sorcerer to the Crown more. Even though both of these are light in tone and occasionally silly fantasies, Sorcerer to the Crown had like more serious topics that it dealt with on the side. So this one got 3 stars and it brings my TBR count down to 66 books. Then I reread the first 2 novellas in the science fiction novella series Murderbot Diaries. So All Systems Red and Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. I own these as ebooks. So these are told from the point of view of Murderbot, who is the security android who has hacked its governor module and given itself the moniker of Murderbot, while continuing to protect its clients and also watching a lot of like space soap dramas to pass the time, even while on the job, yes. These are just a lot of fun. Murderbot is a lovable character with social anxiety and also very relatable at times. The second one is my favorite of the novellas because that one has the research transport character Art, who is interacting with Murderbot, and I find them lovely together and I love Art. Even though the second one actually has less memorable or less well-defined human characters, I don't mind that at all. I gave the first novella 4 stars and the second one 5 stars. I also read a manga in August. I read From the Library, Delicious in Dungeon, Volume 8 by Ryoko Kui, and this one is a fantasy manga. So this one tells about a group of fancy adventurers who are exploring a dungeon, but they run out of stuff to eat, so they cook the monsters they encounter. So this is a weird high fantasy manga cooking manga mix, and it's hilarious. And I'm just so happy that there's this high fantasy comedy manga of such great quality around. I love the art, I find the jokes funny, the characters are lovable, the dungeon lore is so great and we learn more and more with each volume. There's just so much to the world and we just keep getting more. And this one was the first volume that I went and gave 5 stars to. I also went back and gave my favorite volume, volume 6, 5 stars. I had given it 4.5 stars before, but I changed it to 5 stars because I just admitted how much I love this series. I highly recommend it. And finally, I read From the Library Convenience Store Woman, or Lähikaupan Nainen, because I read this Finnish translation by Sayako Murata. So this is Japanese contemporary literature and I had no idea what I was getting into. I thought slice of life with the beauty of the routine of working in a konbini or convenience store. And yes, I got some of that, but I also got a lot of other stuff as well. It took some very weird, unexpected directions, some of which I didn't care for. So the main character is Keiko, and she doesn't really understand everyday human interaction or social codes or behavior rules, and she just really likes to work at a convenience store. She thrives there because there are very set rules and routines, how you talk to customers, what sort of stuff you do at what part of the day. So there's a routine and your rules of interacting and rules of behavior are stated clearly. Usually in everyday life she just guesses or models herself after other people like her sister or her friends. I have no idea what to rate this because I didn't particularly care about it, but I did read it in 2 sittings and I clearly wanted to know what was going to happen and what the book was about. I, like Keiko, mostly enjoyed the convenience store parts. So maybe it would be like 2 stars because it wasn't really for me, but I can't really give it a rating. So now we're moving on to the receipts. Did I make progress in my 10 books to read in 2020 list? No, I didn't. Did I make progress in my reread challenge? No, but I did start to read Dragons of Autumn Twilight and I had a lot of fun doing that. And then I didn't also complete my TBR chart challenge, which was to read a book featured in a book haul revisit. By now I'm like, do I even want to read the books that were in my book haul revisits, like book from my old hauls, if I just keep putting them off and not doing this challenge? That's maybe something for me to think about. So let's move on to the haul part. I bought 2 ebooks in August. I bought Mapping the Interior by Stephen Graham Jones, which is a horror novella that I'm currently reading for Fortnite Frights readathon. I also bought Dragons of Spring Dawning by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. This is the 3rd book in the Dragonlance Chronicles, which I'm rereading. It's a nostalgic childhood high fantasy favorite. I'm currently reading the 2nd book, so I'm gonna get to this one soon. Then 2 of my pre-orders came in. I got Harrow the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, which is the sequel to Gideon the Ninth. This is a gothic space fantasy series. This brings my TBR to 67 books. And I got The Tyrant Baru Cormorant, the 3rd in this fantasy series, called The Masquerade by Seth Dickinson, and this one brings my TBR to 68 books. I just want to say, all these 3 books have like different finishes to the dust jacket. The first one had this like buttery feel, it's right here, and the second one had this sort of gritty, bit sandy feel, and this one is just shiny sort of sticky thing that I don't really enjoy. So that's a bit about the tactile feel of these books. So I knew that those 2 pre-orders would arrive in August, so I wanted to make sure that I read at least 2 books off my TBR so that my TBR count wouldn't go up. And I did manage to do that, so I read 2 books off it and then I got 2 books in the mail. And now for the stats. In August I read 9 books, that was 1,846 pages. I read on average 60 pages a day and took on average 9 days to read a book. And my current physical TBR number is still 68 books. So that was my August reads and receipts. Let me know if you have read any of these books. I hope to get the September reads and receipts filmed for you soon. And that's all from me for now, and I'll see you in my next video.